it's great, great information. Okay, it's
Already
6:35, so we're going to go ahead and start.
episode priorities.
Thanks everybody for coming, and I see that we have lots more people joining as we're going. So we appreciate that very much. I am Karen Solomon Barwani. I am co-president of NAPS along with Ashley Scott, who is host and our Zoom master for the night. We are very thankful here to Michaela Arciaga, who is going to be our moderator and our leader for the evening. We are extremely grateful to have multiple elected officials here, and please, I apologize if I don't get everybody. I'm just kind of running through who's here in the room, at least as far as I can see on my screen. We have State Rep Betsy Holland, who is also an APS parent. We have APS board member Cynthia Briscoe Brown. We have board member Ken Zeff. We have State Senator Rashawn Kemp, who we are very thankful is here, and welcome to the State Senate. We will have State Rep and former board chair Jason Estevez when he finishes the other meeting, the Tri-Caucus meeting that he is a part of right now. So the format for the evening, really, I'm going to turn the whole thing over to Michaela, and she's going to talk to us about what is going on in state legislature, how it applies to us. It's really hopefully going to be kind of a discussion type thing. You guys will be, or everyone will be able to ask questions. What I would really love to come away with from this meeting is an opportunity for the state legislators who are on the phone, for the board members or on the call, to be able to tell us as a parent community what they need from us in order to further the agendas that are going to benefit all of our kids. And then we can, make this an interactive discussion. And what questions do you guys have? So with that, will turn it over to Michaela and mute myself.
Thank you so much. It's really lovely to see everyone this evening. And hello to all the electeds who I have seen almost all of you today.
Michaela, I'm sorry I did not introduce your credentials, so please
okay.
do that. I apologize.
There's a bunch of letters that really don't matter. None of them are PhD. I work for the organization called IDRA. We are the Intercultural Development Research Association. We are a nonpartisan education civil rights nonprofit. We focus on achieving equal educational opportunity for every child through strong public schools. So NAPS is one of my longtime favorites, and I always love getting to have this conversation. If you're interested in our work, I'm happy to share more of that as well. You're welcome to join any of our newsletters, and I'll share some links with you as well. This is our Georgia team. I actually have two fellows that are not displayed here right now, but I plan and facilitate and coordinate all of our advocacy plans at the state level. So that means I monitor all of our bills. I coordinate any action items. I help coordinate advocacy days. And that's just a quarter of the year. The rest of the year I spend doing things like this. I'm talking to parents, I'm talking to teachers, I'm especially talking to students. We focus on really building out the engagement and empowerment and capacity of folks to participate in this process, which is often very challenging and not very welcoming. And so I have a couple of things I'm going to do with us tonight. I'm hopefully going to let you look at some bill language that is moving and is active. I'm also going to talk about our perspectives. So I will say from a civil rights perspective, everything we do is look at this from a civil rights perspective. So we may not agree on positions on all of the bills, but I will highlight where we stand on certain things, concerns that we have about certain bills, and also some of the larger trends that we're seeing in the body in both chambers right now. I also am a please stop me and ask questions person. It's been a little bit of a while since I was in the classroom talking to normal people, and so I live in a slightly policy wonky space. So please don't hesitate to stop me, come off mute or put it in the chat. I've got all my screens on today so I can follow both. This is what we do. Like I said, we do only lobbying and working in the Capitol is only a quarter of my year. I spend the rest of the year training folks. I also have a program I'd love to talk with some of my NAPS folks about, working with young people and getting them trained to come and advocate in the Capitol themselves. And I can't wait to share that with you. So ask me any questions. Don't wait till the end. I'm going to cover a lot of bill numbers. Please don't stress if you don't get something written down. I will share our bill tracker with you as well so that you can look over all of the education bills that we're following. I'm just going to highlight a few. This is not a comprehensive list. I'm going to, I think Senator Kemp already hopped off. So I'm going to preemptively, I do have his bill on here, but we have a lot of bills that I didn't get to cover. Most of these are my main priority. Different from last year, I really want to start on what y'all can do. I think NAPS is unique in that you have such highly engaged members. Y'all know the education system, you know APS, and that experience is your expertise. Like I said, there's a bunch of letters behind my name. But most of what has made me effective in my role is my personal experience as an educator, and working with the groups of students that I have, and my experiences teaching math. Those are things I draw on every single day to navigate that space. And so I think that sometimes there feels like this pressure, especially for folks who don't come in every day, to feel like they have to be experts on whatever the issue they care about is, and that's simply just not true. Like I said, being able to capture what you experience every day as parents navigating the public school system, as folks who are paying taxes, as people who have to figure out what school to send your kid to. If you're choosing to send your kid to North Atlanta versus Paideia or Westminster, those are big decisions that really can impact state policy as well. And so with that, I'm trying to kind of share what I have found to be an effective approach to advocacy. One, it's remembering that legislators work for you. And that was not my intention to really emphasize that too much with all of our elected officials here today, but I still think rings true. What I have found is that instead of having to be the expert on something, it is actually a lot more strategic for us to ask our legislators questions, ask them questions about the bill. The more practical some of the implications of these bills are, the more powerful your questioning can be. So I'm going to talk to you about a couple of bills that we're watching, and most of the time what we're trying to set up are questions that then the authors of these bills have to answer. Is it going to cost more money? How is this going to impact my kid? And then pairing those questions with your anecdotes, those experiential expertise that you have, is really the most impactful advocacy we ever see. And then when you do get to have a conversation with an elected official, I think one of the most powerful things that you can walk away with is what their position on an issue is. If they are not supporting kids with 504s, that's a concern, right? And knowing how many kids we have that do benefit from IEPs or 504 plans. If they don't support public schools, if they are advocating for vouchers, or they are advocating for the divestment of our public schools, like those are things that matter to us as constituents. So I hope that if you do make it up to the Capitol this year, one, you'll give me a call, let me know to look for you, and two, that you will feel confident that your questions are actually the same questions that they should be asking, and are the things that they should know will have impact from their bills. And that is what it takes to be an effective advocate up in the Capitol. Are there any questions for me there? I know I just said a lot of things. So we're going to practice this. I'm going to start by telling you a little bit about what we're focusing on. The biggest conversation that we're having, there's two right now, is around school safety. As many of you, I'm sure, are aware, there was a school shooting that happened at the very beginning of the school year in Appalachia High School in Winder, Georgia. Since then, there has been a really increased push to change the way we do school safety. The concerning thing about that conversation is that there is often a conflation of security with discipline, and we're seeing that happen right now. So we have a giant bill. It's called HB 268. I have it listed down here. This bill is backed by the Speaker of the House, who is the most powerful person in the House of Representatives. It is massive. It is over 60 pages of code section. It touches a variety of education sections, from things like record reporting to mental health coordinators to interdistrict transfers. Not all of it is bad, but there are some really significant concerns in this bill, particularly when it pertains to student privacy. And I'll share a brief that I wrote before this session started about our concerns about how discipline might be used to violate kids' privacy rights. The concern about privacy, we have a couple of bills that are calling for this, is that they want to create a statewide database tracking students who make quote unquote credible threats to school safety. It's not clear what a credible threat is. That hasn't been defined. We've been told that law enforcement will know what that means and that they'll investigate it. But when we're talking about kids, and we're talking about kids and teenagers with underdeveloped brains, we're worried that that might translate to certain kids being disproportionately disciplined and tracked than others. And also, we're talking about I think it's $140 million contract to manage this database that GMA and local law enforcement, as well as the education admin, will have access to. So that is the biggest concern we have. There's also concerns that, like, if you're that we're requiring, if a child transfers between school districts, that their records be transferred. They're tightening that timeline. It used to be 10 days, it now is 5 days. There's concerns about where kids are going to be in that time period before the districts transfer those records. If those records aren't available, what happens? But there is also, on the other side of this, there's additional infrastructure being created to provide mental health support to kids. There's there's a creation of what are they called? Mental health coordinators that will work at the system level to coordinate training. There's mandated training for teachers, students, and teachers and educators and students that have to do with, like, how to recognize risk factors of violence and self-harm. Things that in general we actually think will be good for schools. It's not clear how they're going to pay for this, I will say. And we do have a couple versions of this bill. The worst version being that they want to charge kids who are between the ages of 13 to 17 who make quote unquote terroristic threats with a felony. We're already allowed to charge 13 to 17-year-olds with a felony for certain crimes, but in general, we as an organization oppose the criminalization of children, particularly when we know that that will disproportionately impact Black children, children of color, children with disabilities. And so those are some of the bills that we're looking on. And so HB 268 is the speaker's bill. That's the one we're expecting to move. Go ahead, Karen.
Question about that. Is the reason there's no, is it because the reason that there's no specifications around the what counts as a terroristic threat, that because the parameters haven't been defined yet, or is it because they don't want to share that information?
I don't think it's that a not wanting to. One, it hasn't been defined, and two, I think it's more of a, like, we don't know all of the things that we would want to count as a credible threat. So we don't want to be too specific because we also don't want to limit ourselves in what we're able to charge a kid with. Which I know is a deeply cynical interpretation, but that is essentially what I was told by more than one representative. So, yeah. What we are asking for on this, so the other concern is that if a kid is added to this database, there's no process for them to be removed. They're also expanding what has to be transferred between districts. So if a student transfers from, say, Savannah, Chatham County to Atlanta Public Schools, not only would they have to include their academic and their attendance records and their personal histories, it would also include things like any discipline orders that have been made about the student in the last 24 months, in the last 2 years, as well as mental health evaluation records, which raises, again, a lot of concerns about student privacy. At face value, especially given some of the conversations we've had about school safety, I know that this doesn't seem particularly concerning. I think our concern is that some of the, it's not clear always, or it's not consistent between schools or even classrooms, what will lead to a child getting a threat, a crime. What is it called? We're going to look at it. So let me pause for a second. I'm going to show you some bill language. If you cannot see, please let me know and I will zoom in. There's two sections that you're going to see. One is about what's included in the reporting requirements, and then the other is about the mental health coordinator. So I'm giving you two different sections of the bill. Again, it's a 60-page bill, and I'm trying to save time. But I want you thinking about your questions that you would ask. what concerns that you have about this question. I'll give you like 10 minutes, and I'm just going to give you a heads up. There's a lot of code language there. Try to suss through that. I'm not going to break down the bill for you today. We can do that another time. But just take a second, read over both of these code sections, and think about questions you might want to ask. And then if it's okay, I'd like 2 to 3 people to maybe share some of the questions they have. So we're looking at some bill language. This is HB 268. This left one is the reporting language, what will be included in any student record. And then over here is the qualified mental health coordinator position that they are creating. So I'll take just a second to be quiet and let y'all look at
Now, make sure you press record, Ms. Ferguson and Tanya.
I will
Or
try.
someone
Like I
else.
said, I'll try. I'm on that. They just my computer broke. I'll see if it'll work. I don't know if I can. I'm sorry.
And Ms. Chubby, I got a question for you. Are you going to provide a Google slide for me to take notes?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't see how to.
All right.
Mr. Hudson.
How do I get?
Mute
I
yourself.
can't see how to get in.
I'll just go in the breakout.
It shows, but I
I'm
can't.
putting you there.
Okay.
Alrighty, y'all. I'm gonna go ahead and move us on. Does anyone have any questions that they would have about this bill? What's up, Cynthia?
I have some questions about the about subsection C on the left. I think it's line 161.
Yeah.
And several of the ones following. I know that a notice of a disciplinary hearing is just that. It's a notice. It's not actually any sort of adjudication. It's a scheduling matter, and a notice can be generated by a parent who is appealing a decision by a tribunal. So it can actually be generated by somebody who is denying that anything happened. Also, there seems to be a lot of action in a lot of language in here about notices and reports none of which are adjudications that a student has actually done anything wrong,
Exactly.
which concerns me a lot.
What would be a question you might ask the sponsor or the chairman or the members of the committee about that?
Could you clarify, Chair, or someone, could you clarify the language making a scheduling notice a trigger under this statute? And can you clarify where due process happens prior to the student being found subject to the statute?
Great question. And that is actually one of the questions we also asked. Our concern was that you have you're compiling all these records that a student may have. Something I think is really interesting, to your point, that these are all, that none of this constitutes actual adjudication, meaning like it doesn't actually substantiate that something happened or that the student actually did anything. The only ones are potentially if they're serving a suspension, but even we know that human beings are fallible, and not every time a kid does something wrong, or not every time a kid is suspended have they done something wrong, unfortunately. Even with the felonies, like these are the only things that are actually a student has been charged with the crime, but not even Class A or not all of Class A felonies are violent felonies. I think some of them are theft. Not that that's like great, right? But what we would not want to see is this presumption that just because a child has made a mistake in the past means that they are going to constantly be a mistake or be a threat in the school moving forward. To your point, so notice of a report of a criminal action is actually only if there are allegations of a criminal act, not that they have been substantiated, not that they have been tried. So there's a lot of concern.
I could make a report against you.
Exactly.
It wouldn't be true, but
right. Well, and that's the thing, right? So we've raised a lot of concerns about due process, and the ways in which a parent can dispute such a report or a record, especially like if you have a child who is transferring between schools. Does anyone have another question that might come to mind? Thinking about this as a response to school shootings and attempting to make schools more secure. What do you got, Karen?
So I've got a devil's advocate question that I don't know if anybody else would have this question, but one of the biggest concerns from the Appalachia shooting, right, was that this student had made these, I believe, please correct me if I'm wrong, but had made threats and was there was a known issue that was not brought from the old school to the new school. So how do you cover for, or how do you solve for that? I don't know what the answer is, but there's got to be some in between somewhere, right? I don't know. And as a parent of a child with special needs, where I'm very open about that, who absolutely would be the first one to say something to the effect of, I'm coming to shoot up the school tomorrow because he was upset and angry. I don't want my kid being punished. I don't want a felony on my child for that, but I also understand that you got to take it seriously.
For the rest of their life, that has them labeled by law enforcement and schools as credible threats. Yeah,
right.
Those are the kinds of things that we're like. I'll be honest, as a former teacher, I mean, I still struggle with the argument that like having access to a former student's records would be all that beneficial for me, except that maybe it might like be a flag for me to somewhat handle with care, right? It didn't help me. It doesn't help me to know what my kid's discipline behavior is per se. It doesn't help me build relationships with my students. It just adds a label to a kid that makes it harder for them to start over or grow from their mistakes. To your point about the shooter in Appalachia, he had made threats. You're right. But it was investigated by the FBI. It was not investigated by local law enforcement or GMA, to any of those points. And that communication did not happen between those agencies. I will say this does require some additional interagency communication. But in general, it doesn't provide for what to do if that record is in place, right? Like if a kid brings this history with them, it does not in fact provide for what can be done or what should be done for a student if they do have this history, beyond raising risks of the violation of their privacy as well.
Well, and I suppose to APS's credit, there are metal detectors in the buildings, in the middle schools and high schools, and so there's other measures in place that account for some of those things. So
absolutely, yeah. So you all have hit on many of the things. Another bit. So the other thing to be mindful of is parents. Y'all have extensive rights when it comes to your students' privacy under FERPA, which is the Family Education and Rights to Privacy Act. Is that right? I think that's right. I've looked at that acronym so many times this week, it doesn't feel like a real thing anymore. But hey, Catherine. So there are extensive like guardrails in place through FERPA, which we have highlighted as potential language that could be adopted to help make some of this clearer. Like to your point, if my child, I've had more than one student who would make jokes about don't come to school tomorrow, or I'm going to shoot up the school. And we always have to take that seriously, but we also have to take the context of the child in question. Both of the children who made those threats or made those statements were kids with disabilities. They were trying to be funny. And those are the kinds of things that we would want to take into account before, like you said, charging them with a felony, labeling and putting them in a database for the rest of their life with no process for how to off-road them from that policy. There's a little bit in the way of like remediation that is available and supports for a student who's found has made one of these threats. It also is requiring the creation of some sort of anonymous reporting system. Where anyone who is concerned that a threat might be made or is at hand can report that. There's some concerns about the efficacy of that kind of program, but in general, that you guys are kind of on the right path. You guys are exactly on the right path with some of the things that we're concerned about. Are there any other questions for me about these bills and the kind of direction we're going with things? I do want to highlight. Not all of these bills are in the Education Committee. So House Bill 268 is actually still in committee. There were concerns raised by pretty much every party involved. The sheriffs had concerns, GMA had concerns, the teachers had concerns, the Department of Education had concerns. So they are still working on this bill, which means that if you do have questions or you do have concerns, you can also still reach out to the bill sponsor. You can reach out to the chairman and ask them questions and your concerns. Senate Bill 54 and Senate Bill 171 are both on the Senate side in Senate Education, and then SB 160. Actually, I'm not positive 171 is the right number. Let me double check that. But SB 61 is actually a separate bill that has to do with the terroristic threats, which is in judiciary. We are expecting that to get a hearing sometime this week, and if that is something you're interested in, I'll show you some ways to keep track of that. All right, moving on to much more fun things to talk about. Funding is very much part of the conversation this year. I really want to highlight Senator Estevez, Senator Kemp, Representative Phil Lallier have all signed on to or sponsored bills that have to do with increasing funding for schools. The proposed budget for the next year is $14 billion for quality basic education. That is the formula that funds much of the programming and instructional costs of educating our students. The total budget for education and the Department of Education is $15.9 billion. In there, last time we talked about this, we talked about the cost of pupil transportation. I know the challenges of transportation are something that APS has been dealing with for several years, and part of that is because the state has kept funding very, very static. Last year, they added $150 million extra dollars to the pupil transportation allotment. That has stayed the same this year. They added about $10 million more, but not nearly the level of infusion you would want to see to keep up with things like inflation and aging fleet bus maintenance costs. We also have a couple of bills that are bipartisan for funding the challenges of kids living in poverty. We are one of only 6 states that do not do that. House Bill 27, House Bill 245, and SB 128. House Bill 245 is sponsored by Rep. Phil Lallier, and Senate Bill 128 is sponsored by our own Senator Jason Estevez. And when he gets on, we'll make sure we grill him about what that would do and how much that will cost. The other thing I wanted to highlight, I know this group has been really strong advocates around supporting public schools and opposing the privatization of our schools. Many of you are aware that we had a very substantial school voucher program under SB 233 that was passed in the spring of last year. It goes into effect this fall. And we're watching closely to see how they may try to dismantle the guardrails they put in place. They weren't enough guardrails, but they would like to dismantle that even further. A couple of voucher bills that we are watching are House Bill 328, which actually has to do with our tax credit voucher. It's a different program. Senate Bill 124, which is an interesting bill in itself. It goes into any section of the Georgia Code where they reference the Department of Education and adds its successor after it. It also is saying that they need to implement any guidance from the federal agency and share that with the state legislature. I don't really know why it's necessary, but it is getting a hearing tomorrow. It also is expanding the voucher program to be eligible for military students who are dependents of active military service members. And then the last one is Senate Bill 152. This is also expanding the voucher to be it's expanding voucher eligibility for the siblings of students who may be living in foster care. So if you are a family who uses the voucher to send your children to private school and you are also a foster parent, then this would expand to the foster children. We have no qualms and no issues with foster children. But we do oppose these bills. We are really concerned about SB 152 because it does not have many of the kind of foundational protections you would want to see for particularly vulnerable or historically marginalized groups, like such as foster children. There's requirements that the participating private schools comply with federal disability requirements like IDEA. It also doesn't require that the private schools comply with requirements that foster children are entitled to. So that is where our opposition comes to that bill. In no way does it have to do with opposing kids in foster care's access to education. In fact, we'd love for us to better fund public schools so that they can get quality support in their public schools as well. Are there any questions? What questions do we have about funding? If there is anything I haven't covered, I'm happy to talk about it.
Are we going to talk about the 504s and
Yes,
the implications
I have that,
of?
and if
Okay.
I'm looking at my time, I'm going to be that.
Yep.
I think I have 2 more. Yeah.
Yeah.
2, like,
Okay. I think we really want to cover that and the potential and the implications of the Department of Education
yes.
going away.
I don't have a slide for it, but I will turn my slides off and I will talk to you guys about some of the DOE stuff. It is not my area of expertise. I am very, very enmeshed in state policy right now. But I do have a national director who gives us weekly updates about what's happening at the national level. So I will do my best to cover that. The last thing I want to cover is attacks on LGBTQ students, in particular trans students. Again, so the speaker, if you have noticed, the 2 big things that our speaker has been focusing on this year is, the school safety work and protecting women's sports from their perspective. The bill for this is House Bill 267. So if you're keeping track, House Bill 267 is his anti-trans bill, and House Bill 268 is his security bill. If you are following federal politics or national politics, this bill is modeled after the Riley-Gaines Act, which was already signed by President Trump. Our concern with this bill, in addition to the concerns about the discrimination against trans students, is that this bill goes in and strikes the word gender from all code sections and it replaces it with sex. I have asked a lot of lawyers what that means and what the potential for that is, and none of them have been able to tell me, which makes me even more concerned about the implications of such a bill. Some of the concerns that have been raised is how this would apply in situations that would otherwise be covered in hate crime provisions. So if a crime was committed against a person based on their gender or their perceived gender, would that still be the same as if it was their sex or their perceived sex? And that's not clear and is not able to be answered. The other thing is that it's not just about sports. This is like a bathroom ban. It's a pronoun ban. It kind of flies in the face of what we know to be best practices for making schools feel welcoming and inclusive. It impacts K-12 schools, private schools, and universities. So any school in the state of Georgia would have to comply with this. Charter schools as well. That's the biggest bill that we have the most concern with. There are other bills, as I put below here, that do similar things. The only other one I might highlight that's a little bit different is Senate Bill 39. This bill, it goes into the state health benefit plan, which is basically the healthcare plan for anyone that is an employee of the state, including teachers. And it prevents the use of that plan for the treatment of gender dysphoria or gender affirming care. They did not do a great job of defining gender affirming care either. They've included a definition for hormone therapy, but just because, which they specifically have written so that it applies to gender affirming care for trans people. But they were not able to address any of the questions of how the definition of hormone therapy might vary across the entire code for Georgia, and how that may impact like women seeking fertility treatment, how it might impact men who are seeking treatment for sexual disorders or even just like hair loss or hormone disorders. It is a concerning bill. It has not been brought to the floor. No, it did. It has passed from the Senate to the House. We're not sure if it will pass the House. It is currently in the Insurance and Labor Committee, which I'll be honest is not a or no, it is in health. It is in the Health Committee, which maybe okay. Hard to say. Chairman Hawkins has not been a great ally on these issues, but some of the other members on here, including some of the Republicans on here, have notoriously not enjoyed engaging in these kinds of conversations. So that's one of the other major education trends we're following. There are some concerns around targeting of immigrant students, but that hasn't evolved as much as we were expecting. And then there's a bunch of other bills. I'm about to show you a whole long list. Please don't stress if you don't get them all written down. Again, I'm going to share our tracker with you so you can look through at your leisure. I also want to take a second to answer Laura's question. So Arizona recently spent over $1.4 billion on their voucher program. There are a couple of differences between our voucher program and theirs, even though they are the same structure, which is an educational savings account voucher, which means that the state designates a specific vendor to receive the funds from the state and distribute them to eligible participants. Our bill has quite a few what we call means testing. One, which is that it has an income requirement to be eligible. It also has a residency requirement, meaning that the students have to live in the attendance zone where they of a school that is considered bottom 25%. And actually, as it stands right now, it is subject to allocation to QBE, which means that it is it is 1% of QBE. So going back to the 14, so it's 14.4 billion for quality basic education, which means that they will allot about 144 million to the Promise Scholarship accounts. And that will be subject to how much QBE receives every year. For anyone who is interested, we also found out that the cost to lower our school counselor ratio to 250 to 1 is only 156 million. So we had choices. I hope that answers your question, Laura. Okay, I have a bunch of bills for you. I'm so sorry. They are in order numerically, and this is not all of the Senate bills that we were watching, but it is some of it. It's a mix of good and a mix of bad things that we're concerned about. HB 38 is a great bill. It revises eligibility to expand needs-based aid for college, which I know I have several folks in here that have a class in and are thinking about funding college. We also have HB 59. This would reduce the school counselor ratio to 250 to 1. Currently, the state sets by law how much they are able to fund a student to counselor ratio, and it is currently funded at 450 to 1, meaning that for every one school counselor, they have 450 students to manage. That number fluctuates by district, and it actually falls out around the average in Georgia is about 380 students to 1, which is still significant, especially when we're talking about mental health support for students, college counseling for students, etc. For the NAPS group in particular, I wanted to highlight some of our charter bills. House Bill 202 and Senate Bill 82 are companion bills. They are revising some of the charter approval process and also adding I think it's $100,000 incentive for local school districts to approve charters in their community. I know I have a couple of school board members on board who would online who would love to tell you guys how much it actually takes to operate a school. It is definitely more than $100,000 though. And if a local district approves the school, a charter school, then they are also responsible for helping. Yes, they are responsible for providing additional financial support to that school. Another bill I think that will be very interesting for this group is House Bill 340. This bill just passed out of committee this afternoon, and it would prohibit school cell phones use from bell to bell, meaning bell at the beginning of the day and bell at the end of the day, in K through 8 classrooms. It had a lot of support, I will be honest. I don't see this bill getting slowed down. I know that even with concerns raised about security, and kids being able to reach their parents in the event of an emergency, etc. I run a shadow program, and a couple of my students wanted to speak to those concerns specifically about this bill. A couple others, Senator Kemp, who had to leave early, has a bill about removing 3Qing for literacy. This is a little bit of a spicy bill, I will be quite honest. It is not well loved by the teachers groups. And it is part of the larger conversation around literacy that started last year. We also have a bill that would require mandatory kindergarten for 5th grade or for 5-year-olds. With that comes an allocation from the state to provide funding to be able to provide a kindergarten to all kids. There are many other bills. I'm going to give you that link as well if you would like it. But I'll pause here before we talk about 504 and give you all the chance to ask any questions you have. Yeah, Elizabeth, HB 202 is one of those. Another is, oh gosh, I had it on my list to tell you guys about and I totally forgot. Oh goodness. Ken, you want to ask me your question while I look for the answer to her question?
Yeah, Michaela, this on this page, what do you think is what should we be worried about? Because you can make yourself crazy. Trying to track everything. What if you had to handicap these, if you're a betting person, what should we be thinking about?
So like I said, House Bill 340 has made it out of the committee. I do think it's going to pass the chamber. And I think it'll probably pass pretty close to unanimously. If I'm honest, House Bill 59, House Bill 60 probably aren't going to. There's a whole bunch of education bills that I would love to highlight for y'all that are not going to move, unfortunately, just based on the politics of the space. I don't think mandatory kindergarten is going to happen. House Bill 202 has not gotten a hearing in the House Education Committee. I do think it will get a hearing in Senate Education.
So to be clear, we're going to ban cell phones, but not assault weapons, right? Just want to make sure. Okay, just want to.
On gun control issues, I have no opinion on that statement. But I would highly encourage you to talk to your locally elected officials. Rep Holland, did you want to weigh in on that?
Oh gosh, no. Okay. That is accurate, Karen. We are not currently banning.
I say that on behalf of myself, not on behalf of NAPS. Let me just throw that out there. That's Karen talking.
Totally valid question. Sorry. Totally nonpartisan. Also, just by the way.
Yes, nonpartisan. It was just a question, just a clarifying question. That's all that was.
Okay, so 202, like I said, I think 202 will at least get a hearing. I do not think it is a popular bill. It is deeply insulting to our superintendents who do not like it. Elizabeth, I swear to you, I literally just had that bill written down and I don't know where I put it. But yes, we have a couple of bills, and I actually really wanted to do just like a whole retrospective. We've had several bills that have kind of rearranged both the oversight, the reallocation, the management of our charter schools, and that's specifically both state charter schools and local charter schools. One example is that all the oversight and the administration of all charter schools has moved under the State Charter School Commission, partially because DOE didn't have the capacity to manage it, and partially because they didn't want to fund DOE to manage it, and instead have diverted those funds to the Charter Commission. I'm going to find this bill for you before the end of the day. But there's been several bills that have happened over the last few years that culminate into a concerning shift around charter schools that has lessened accountability, lessened oversight, and lessened transparency, which I am not an agnostic, but I think if you are an agnostic, we should all be able to find common ground, and that any use of public funds should be subject to the same transparency and accountability that public schools are held to. And so it is a particular hill that I'm willing to die on to like put all those things together, and we'll do that for you at some point. But to your point, a couple of things that also aren't on here. Senate Bill 74 is the library and criminalization bill. That is getting a hearing tomorrow. It does not just apply to school libraries, it also applies to public libraries. Basically, it says that if a librarian is found to have provided harmful materials to a minor, they can be subject to misdemeanor charges. They have to show a good faith effort to have prevented access to such materials. It's not clear who gets to define what those materials are. It is deeply concerning. I will say, so it is getting a hearing. I don't know. I was told one thing by several high-ranking senators on the majority side, and it's still getting a hearing. So I don't know that there's an appetite for this at like the House level, but I also don't like the Senate playing chicken with legislation like this, where they pass crazy things and then rely on the House to kind of shut it down. I don't think it's good policy for anybody. So that's one of the other concerns I have. Let's see. We also have SB 120 is a anti-DEI bill. It is in higher ed, but it applies to all schools, all public schools. It basically says that no public school in K-12 or higher ed may promote or support a program that promotes diversity, equity, or inclusion. Haven't defined diversity, equity, or inclusion. Haven't defined support. It is a mess. It's getting a hearing at 8 a.m. on Thursday in the Senate Higher Ed Committee. I don't think that one's going to pass out of committee, at least this year. The chairman, the new chairman of higher education is a former university administrator and president, and he has lots of thoughts about practicality. And it is a deeply impractical bill. But those are some of the ones we're watching right now. What other we're watching, I will just flag for y'all, and I know that NAPS has a decent immigrant community. House Bill 18 would require that schools demonstrate a citizenship for a student to be eligible for dual enrollment. This is in the Higher Ed Committee. It has not gotten a hearing. Chairman Martin didn't seem particularly enthused with this bill, but he also is what I call a true believer in that he does not feel that anyone who is not a citizen of the United States should benefit from American or should have access to American benefits, which is an almost direct quote. So I think that if we can raise more of the concerns around the implementation and the practicality of such a thing, which is that public schools in the K-12 level are not allowed to investigate the citizenship status of a student. They are not allowed to document it, they are not allowed to track it, and they are not allowed to do anything that would lead to inquiring about that status or preventing a child from enrolling based on that status. This is an interesting bill because it lives in kind of a gray area in that it is a K-12 program, but it is accessing higher ed, and there is no guaranteed access to higher education in the U.S. It hasn't moved yet. We're hoping to leverage some of our school superintendents, some of our school counselors. This is not, unfortunately, neither the sponsor nor the chairman are subject to really value-based reasoning on this bill. So we're really trying to emphasize just some of the practical challenges, which is that if it moves forward, it's going to put schools between state policy and federal policy and subject them to litigation no matter what. So those are some of the major ones we're really watching and concerned about. Some of the pros. I want to be very clear. We don't outright oppose Senate Bill 268. There's actually like some decent aspects of it. It just really needs some cleaning up as far as procedures and transparency and protections for kids. Okay. Any other questions? House Bill 267 is going to pass is pretty much the expectation as well. The anti-trans sports bill.
Is this a good time to, before we go on to the 504 stuff, is this a good time to do a quick run through of our state legislators who are on the call and see what we can do?
And is back.
Maybe we do wait. I don't know. I'd love to just, go through each one of you guys. I see that Senator Kemp has rejoined, but I would love to hear from them real quick and see if there's anything we as a community or what we can do as a community to support you.
I'd also love to take a second too for folks to raise some concerns they might have that they'd like to just like highlight as far as things. We can talk through whether stuff is state policy. That's one of my biggest things, but just what would y'all like to see as far as policy as well? But yes.
Michaela, there's also a question in the chat I'm interested in too about the charter bills, being funded by districts and, is there any legislation there?
You're on mute, Michaela.
Yeah. What's up? Okay.
You were on mute.
Sorry. I don't know how that happened. So as HB 202 and SB 82 are the main ones right now. There's another one and I cannot remember what it is, but I will find it and send it over. Basically, it is wanting to do some revisions to the local approval process. So right now, in order for a local charter to be established, it has to go through quite a bit of steps of like establishing local need, local interest, local support. And then it also has to be reviewed and approved by the local school board. As of right now, if folks are not able to, if a local school board rejects an application for a charter school, this bill would basically say they have to provide the written like justification for why they rejected the application. They have to send it to the state charter commission, and there's someone else it has to go to, and I can't remember if it's the body or if it's the state board. And then if the local charter does not get approved by the local board, they can also go to the state charter school commission, have their application reviewed, and be approved as a state charter school. There were some concerns about the growing state charter allotment, which I don't have on my mind. It was 28 million last year. It's increased since then. And so this is meant to kind of divert charters to accessing more local approval. So if the local, so while there is kind of the stick is that if the local district just rejects an application, they have to go through quite a few administrative and bureaucratic hurdles. They're not so like required to review the application in a certain number of years. And And it also allocates that $100,000. If a local district does approve a local charter application, they'll receive a one-time $100,000 grant, I guess, to support with the startup costs and the funding of said school. Which again, $100,000 is really not a lot when it comes to running and operating a school. Right. So, and part of that, this process is because to board member Brooks's point, charter organizations cannot receive as much money from the state allotment as they could receive if they were approved as a local charter school. And again, there have been concerns raised by some of the fiscal stewards in the House about how much the state is putting into the state approved charter schools. So they are looking for ways to push more charters through the local process. Yeah. The one time, like $100,000 is honestly kind of insulting to our school districts, given how much they are signing up to support long term. What other questions? I think I may have been, Elizabeth, I think I was just mistaking that 202 and 82 were different. Wait, no, 82 is different. 82 is part of the approval process, but they are very similar. Any other questions? I see. I mean, if we can always come back for Senator Estevez too. If we want to give Senator Kemp and Rep. Holland a chance to weigh in and share some of their priorities. I do also want to highlight the House instituted a new rule this year, which is that House members are only allowed to sponsor 10 bills, which also includes resolutions. So it may seem like the House members are being more judicious with their bills. So we definitely don't have nearly as many as we've had this time last year, and so, or 2 years ago. But also it means that just less bills are being filed, and legislators are not sponsoring as many bills as they have in the past.
20th and March 27th, raising suspicions over.
Karen, you want to go ahead and let them highlight that, and we can always loop back around for
absolutely, yeah. I can see Rep. Holland, so maybe Betsy can go first.
Sure, and we're just asking effective ways to be able to support.
Really, whatever you want to. If there's anything else you want to talk about, certainly. But how can we help you in furthering your agenda?
So, and I'll be interested to see if Michaela agrees with this, but as you're looking at these bills and you're seeing ones that you either really like or really don't like, the great thing about where we are in the process right now is that many of them have not made it out of committee yet. And the best place to stop a bad bill or encourage a good bill is when it's in committee. So if you've identified a bill that means something to you here, I think it's worthwhile finding out what committee it's in and emailing the chair and the members of that committee to either ask that the bill get a hearing and a vote, or ask that the bill not get a hearing and a vote, depending on what you want that outcome to be. And if I had the website, I could show you the handy dandy way of looking up each of these bills and figuring out which committees that they're in, but we can maybe include that in some follow-up conversation. It's obviously the hardest thing is I always like to encourage people to reach out to their representatives and senators to show up at the Capitol if you have the ability to do that and come down to the ropes and actually bring people out and talk to them about your personal experience. Nothing is more impactful for me personally than having a constituent come and explain their personal story and how they're impacted by a bill. In some cases, that's the first thing I've heard about the bill because we have so many that we're working our way through. I recognize part of the challenge of this group is that you may have like-minded reps and senators already, but we still like hearing from you. So it gives us a chance to introduce you to other people who might be engaged on the committee or on rules who are going to be able to have something to say about those bills going through. And the last thing I'd say, and this is hard to do at the end of the session, but if good bills have been able to make it either out of committee or if they've been able to make it out of the floor, it's worth sending a thank you to the person who made it happen. A lot of times, particularly for education bills that we like, some may have been taking some risks and put a lot of work into being able to make sure that they can pass. It's worth thanking the sponsor. It's worth thanking the chair of the committee. And it's worth thanking your own rep or senator if they voted in favor of something you liked or against something that you didn't. But that follow-up can be nice as well. Megan, I get asked all the time, what's the most effective way to lobby a specific representative or senator? And I will say, if you can make it down to the Capitol, and I know it's daunting, it really makes a difference to come ask us to come out of the chamber and hear your story. A lot of times that can really be a mind changer for folks if they're sitting on the fence.
That's great. Thank you. Senator Kemp, anything to add to that?
Yeah, good evening, everyone, and apologize for dropping off and coming back on. Everything that Representative Holland said, I tell people all the time when they come down to the Capitol, talk to anyone that has one of our badges, one of these badges on, because a lot of times, like she said, you do have like-minded representatives and senators, but other folks need to hear from us. That's how we start to change minds and getting people to hear our stories. One way that you can help me, if you support Senate Bill 93, come to the Capitol next Tuesday for the hearing. If you don't worry about it. Just forget that I shared this. But just really excited to be a part of the Education Committee. I'm sure you've talked about some of the bad bills that have come out of our committee, and a lot of our work is to just make some of these bad bills not as bad. And I was able to get an amendment done on one of the anti-trans bills. And there are some good bills that are coming out, like the Senate just passed Senate Bill 89, which gives a $250 tax credit for child care. So there are some good things happening down at the Capitol, but there are some things that we're not too excited about. But yes, please reach out to folks, come and visit. It really does make a difference, and come and give testimony on bills that you care about. It really does matter for folks to hear from you when we're having to make decisions on these bills in committee.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. I did just get a text from Senator Estevez. He said he's going to be on in just a minute. And I'm sorry, Michaela, for shuffling your presentation timing around. But while we're waiting for him to come on, sorry, this also might be a good time to put the board members on the spot here before we get into the 504 stuff. And I know I didn't ask any of you guys to give a presentation on your legislative agenda, but based on what we've heard so far, and quick top of the mind stuff, if between board member Zeff, board member Brooks, who was not on when I introduced everybody before, so thank you for joining us, board member Brooks, and board member Brown, I think that is who we have on the call. Anything you've heard today, anything that was not mentioned that is a priority for the board that we can help facilitate, yes. And I'll just let you guys duke it out for who speaks first.
I'll go. I guess we'll go reverse alphabetical order. Is always my favorite. This voucher bill is deeply problematic, and it's been getting a lot of press because the new list came out. It is intellectually dishonest to give $6,500 to a kid. And what I think gets lost is they say it's means tested, but the way the means testing, those kids just get priority, and then it opens up to everybody. And so it is not just for for low, it's billed as this low income breakout, a lifeline, but it's not really that way. And it's defined very broadly. And again, there's no accountability, and that really bothers me. So, I think, Michaela, you mentioned if you're going to give public dollars to something, that there should be some public accountability. We don't get any of that. And $6,500 won't buy you into a private school. So it really just becomes a handout to folks that are already there. And so I can't see, and so I would almost prefer, if you're going to do it, go all the way, and just for a small number of kids. At least that's intellectually honest. Say, we'll pay $20,000 for kids, if we really believe in that. But that's not where they are. And so I just encourage people that when you hear this language, it's a struggling lifeline for kids who are trapped in failing schools. That's not really what this is. And I wish folks would be a little more honest about it. So I just wanted to lift that piece up. It's on our agenda.
And I'll add to that. I want to ask a question, because I know when this bill first went out, it said that if you are zoned as a student to any school designated as failing, even if you're not there, then you're eligible for this voucher. So under a system like ours, where we have a flagship high school and middle school and multiple elementary schools, my understanding is that if the middle school or the high school are designated as failing, then every student in the cluster is therefore eligible. And given the list, the number of our schools that are on the list, that is the vast majority of our students who end up being eligible for this voucher. Michaela, is that still the case? Okay, you're not in your head.
It's unfortunately still the case.
That seems to be a significant overreach. And again, a dishonest way to make really virtually every student in Atlanta Public Schools eligible. It will be ruinous for smaller districts, which may only have one middle school or one high school. And there are many of those, as you know. And if you designate the high school as failing, then literally everybody in the entire district qualifies for these vouchers. And that's just yet another way that this bill is really not honest about what it is trying to achieve.
And if I may, they're trying to expand that already. I don't know if Michaela's covered that, but we'll be hearing a bill tomorrow in the Senate Education Committee. They're trying to expand it to now foster students as well. So just want to put that on folks' radar.
So is there any organized effort that is happening now? Is there anything that APS is organizing or anything that we can take the lead in organizing to go downtown? And, I mean, we would be happy to do something if that's most helpful. We can't boil the ocean, as they say, but if there's one or two most impactful issues that we can gather together on for APS, obviously the 504 stuff is extremely important to, but setting that aside for just a second, if there's one more, what would it be for APS?
Can I chime in real quick?
Please.
Yeah, I just there's another bill that I don't think much of anybody is talking about, which is SB 21. And that bill is a sovereign immunity removal. And it could waive sovereign immunity for local governing bodies, including APS, if we are, and we could be sued if we're accused of violating the prohibition on immigration sanctuary policies. So there's some provisions in there that I think are very troubling, and we should be paying attention to, because effectively it could allow for state takeover. And I always look at the bills where there are provisions that can remove funding or cause for a state takeover. And I see those as being like existentially just dangerous. And I would encourage us to be visible about that, especially in lieu of, and I know there's and you brought it up, Michaela, there's a lot of hysteria about ICE and schools and things like that. And the facts are, since 2016 and up through now, we've never actually seen ICE raid a school anywhere in America. So it has not happened, knock on wood, literally. But should something like that happen and then we be found in noncompliance, there's a state takeover measure in that bill that I'm not crazy about. So I just want to put that out there. And then one that I think we should be fighting for, though, Imani Barnes's bill, which would create free breakfast and lunch for kids, which would be funded through the state. That would take $30 million off of APS's budgetary spend, which we put on nutrition. That would be huge, and it would help a lot of districts around the state. And I would propose that, we use some of the education surplus fund to support that. So I digress. Thank you.
That's great.
Yeah.
And definitely things we can take action on as a community. Sorry.
I just wanted to highlight, I wanted to thank you for bringing up SB 21. I will say, it does absolutely have implications. It's any local municipality that is found to be violating quote unquote sanctuary statutes, which in Georgia we do not permit. Some of the concern, particularly for schools, like I said, is that schools are not supposed to know the documentation status of their students. They're not allowed to know. Sometimes like an individual teacher may know, but Board Member Brooks is exactly right. I've linked both HB 60, which is Imani Barnes's bill, and SB 21, which is the sovereign immunity bill that threatens lawsuits as well as state takeover if the local municipality is violating that code section. If you'd like to read them, I will say some of it's hard to say. Like I said, how the House is playing referee on a lot of things, but there is absolutely a hysteria when it comes to how we treat our immigrant communities. So I will, and to Representative Holland's point, HB 60 is a great bill to call Chairman Irwin and ask him for a hearing. They are very much still in the process. So we have a couple key dates. I do want to, before I talk about 504, I do see Senator Estevez is on, and I'll talk about the timeline for the next couple weeks as well.
Can you hear us, Senator Estevez? You just go on, Michaela, and I'll just send him a message and make sure he's.
Okay, I have a couple of things I want to share with y'all. The first is how do I share this? This is a good question. I have an explainer for y'all on the 504 lawsuit, but I also am going to show you guys a little bit of what you may be hearing about. For those who aren't aware, Section 504 is actually a federal act which provides support for kids who may have certain disabilities or educational needs. What happened is that the Biden administration added gender dysphoria as an approved condition for 504 accommodations. This was, I think, in 2023. And then Texas led the charge of lawsuits against the Biden administration for this change. And Georgia then signed on to it. The trial is currently on a pause. So there has been some pushback from the Attorney General's office, who has not appreciated any of the calls he's received in the last couple of weeks, which I find slightly amusing. But the concern that many of us have is not just this issue of, like, regardless of how you feel about gender dysphoria being included, which, again, we're not picking that in that way right now. One of the counts of the lawsuit is that in count 3, they say that Section 504 is unconstitutional in its entirety. So if this lawsuit were to go through, and if it were to be found in favor of the plaintiffs, it could potentially lead to not the repeal, but it could call into question the validity of Section 504. That has really wide reaching implications for not just kids with 504s. It has implications for kids with disabilities. It has implications for any kids that need additional support in school. Not every school district is, well, I know folks know this. Unfortunately, there's a lot of school districts that operate only under what they are coerced to do. And if this were to go away, it would threaten a lot of kids and their access to education. So there are plenty of action items. You're welcome to call Attorney General Carr. His office they will tell you that they are not involved in the suit and the suit is over. The suit is not over. Again, it is in pause. I don't know the exact language for what it is called. The judge has not scheduled the case. They are waiting to see what the Trump administration will do. They have not yet approved the Department of Education secretary, who is the nominee is Linda McMahon. But they anticipate that when the Secretary of Education is confirmed, that those changes will be made without the lawsuit needing to proceed. So thank you, Jason. Thank you, Senator Estevez. It is currently stayed. There are a couple things. I will share this with you. I think this is a great resource. This is where I went for quite a bit of my reading on this. But it's still worth giving them a hard time. And it's also something that you can ask your state legislators already know, but it's worth asking some of our other legislators as well to pull out. I will also say that our current Attorney General is considering a run for governor. And it is concerning to me that he would participate in a lawsuit that would threaten so many of our students. So something to consider.
So here's a question for you. The justification for entering this lawsuit, it was okay with Attorney General Carr because of the gender dysphoria addition. Where Georgia was gung ho to end this.
Yeah.
And what do they say? So Georgia has not withdrawn from this lawsuit. It's just that, and Jason or Senator Estevez, if you can please help with clarification here, we're just in a stay right now, not because Georgia's done anything, but because whatever's happening at the federal level is where the stay is. Is that correct?
And the suit itself, right? The suit itself. They are waiting the confirmation of the Secretary of Education because they anticipate that changes will be made under this new administration, which will make the case unnecessary.
Meaning Department of Ed will go away, so it won't even be an issue.
Well, no, meaning that they'll remove the gender dysphoria approval for accommodation.
Okay.
They're anticipating that. So the Department of Education, and this is kind of going into our 50 or our larger national conversation. My obligatory, I haven't given this tonight, which I should have very early, is that I am not a lawyer. I do a lot of policy work, but I am not an attorney. Also, I do not do a ton of federal work. I do very little federal work. But a lot of the way that the U.S. Department of Education operates is as somewhat of a regulatory body and as an interpreter of laws, right? They provide guidance to our local school districts and local state departments to help them make sense of things that come from the federal body. Historically, the U.S. Department of Education has operated in a somewhat expansive capacity, meaning that they have taken an expansive interpretation of rights, including more children instead of less, taking a broader approach to inclusivity and protections and rights, as opposed to restricting those things down. That does not seem to be the case with this new version of the department and the new administration. I don't know that so now that the department has changed, or the Department of Education administration and the presidential administration has changed, there is new, they are reinterpreting several like long-standing positions on things like that have historically confirmed a lot of civil rights. An example is Title VI, which prevents discrimination based on race, national origin, or ethnicity. There was a letter released, I can't remember if it was today or if it was Friday, basically saying that any consideration for race is actually unconstitutional and violates Title VI, as opposed to like when we look at data and say, oh, we are disciplining more Black students than white students, or we're disciplining more Latino students than white students. This newest version of it's called a Dear Colleague letter, basically says that to consider race is in fact racist and unconstitutional. And that is a lot of the concern that we have, right? Many of you have probably heard it takes an act of Congress. It would take an act of Congress to eliminate the Department of Education. That is still true. But what they can do in the meantime is divert many of its operations and funding and programming into other spaces. An example is the Office of Civil Rights. The Office of Civil Rights has been responsible for investigating claims of discrimination against many vulnerable and many student groups. They investigate claims of language discrimination, racial discrimination, gender or religious, any sort of discrimination that can be made. They investigate those claims. You may have also seen that OCR was basically told to stop work on any complaints that don't have to do with discrimination against white students, which is a really interesting interpretation of their job. But those are the kinds of things that raise a lot of concerns for folks in this space. We rely on the Department of Education to provide guidance for how we better support students of all backgrounds, all identities. I've linked the letter here so you all can read it yourselves. You can read the letter as well as the analysis and the press release from the Department of Education. But
can I just add something
please,
to
go ahead. I know you know more about this.
What you're saying? No, I don't. But I do know a little bit, and what I do know is that it's also important to know that the Department of Education, the elimination of that, while it would be challenging, it is part of the administration's efforts to reduce costs and expenses in the federal budget. And aside from Title I funds and some special education funding, K through 12 organizations do also receive a number of grants from the Department of Education. And it's those kinds of grants that would be the first to be eliminated or frozen. Not only that, but we are seeing child care centers on the verge of closure because of the hiccups in funding and the unreliability of federal funding. So we might see a situation here in the near future where school districts are going to have to make up the difference. And not only that, but we're going to have problems with child care centers staying open, which could exacerbate a child care crisis that not only impacts our families, but impacts our teachers. So it's just something to keep in mind that these actions at the federal level reverberate down to the state and to local levels in ways that will take some time for us to actually feel, but are happening in real time.
So thank you. And Jason, I want to make sure we're all, just because we're coming up on the very, very end here. I want to make sure you have a chance to address your priorities that, related to education and how this group can support you, or if there's anything in particular, any action we can take. Excuse me. In the few minutes that we have left, and let Michaela wrap up when she can.
Yeah, well, I will be very short because I've been on for about 30 minutes and have heard a lot of the stuff so that's been mentioned, and I don't want to be repetitive. But what I will say, and hi everyone, Jason Estevez, state senator for Senate District 35, represent areas of Northwest and Southwest Atlanta, including parts of the North Atlanta, Douglas, and Mays clusters, and Therrell clusters. I am really focused right now on the funding formula for education, and I know that Michaela talked about that. SB 128 is a bill that I spearheaded. It's the second biennial in a row where I've introduced a bill to change the funding formula in Georgia. The formula is 40 years old and needs to be updated. In the interim, this would be a solution that would provide school districts with an additional $2 billion spread out across the state, a lot of it going to rural parts of the state, but some of it going to school districts like Atlanta Public Schools to help educate students living in communities that are low income. And Georgia is one of 6 states that does not account for poverty when distributing money, and that needs to change. So that is a focus. Other than that, there's some other things around childcare that I'm focused on, but spending a lot of time trying to combat some of the distractions, political distractions that y'all have already spoken about. And unfortunately, given where we are in the state, that's what I spend a lot of time doing, trying to stop the bad from getting worse. So that being said, I have a lot of hope. I have a lot of hope around doing continued work around literacy at the state level. I'm hoping that we can get more money to do stuff around that. And I also have hope around continued improvement of our CTAE and workforce development programs in our schools. So there are some bright spots in Georgia, but still obviously a lot of work that is left to be done to support local school systems like Atlanta Public Schools.
That's awesome. Thank you.
So I don't have a ton for y'all. Just to wrap up, I do want to share some links, and I do want to share just a reminder as if anyone who's not a math person, these are greater than signs, not arrows. But when you contact your elected officials, make sure that you in person is better than calling, is better than emailing, is better than postcards. But any contact is good engagement, and it's important to take action in these times and really know who's representing you at every level. Some other ways to get involved, signing up for a newsletter, IDRA and GC. I run a coalition for education justice. It's a statewide coalition. We meet every Monday night to talk about policy. So they just met tonight to talk about the stuff we're tracking this week. It's from 7 to 8 p.m. If you can't make that, we also send all of our updates in written form through email the day after, tomorrow morning. You can also sign up. There's some great newsletters that come from the Professional Association of Georgia Educators page, the Georgia School Board Association, GSBA, or Georgia Association of Educators, GAE. I've also included the link tree to our coalition. There's our tracker is there. You can sign up to join the coalition if that's something you're interested in. I've also included the registration for Public School Funding Day. That is this Thursday. We will be advocating for our Poverty Week bills as well as several other funding bills. It's a great chance to come out and learn how to talk to legislators. We'll teach you how to go to the ropes. We'll teach you how to call legislators, and we'll teach you how to do the work that we also do and bring you with us. So if you're able to make it, we'd love to have you. It'll be, I think it's like 8 a.m. to noon. And the registration for that is also here if you need it. The last. So
we will. Can we have this? Can we post this your presentation?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think there's something particularly incriminating tonight.
And if you did, you can take it out before we. Yeah, we can edit. We have edit rights here, so.
I appreciate that. No, yeah. Please feel free to share. I am happy to, and also if anyone has questions, all my contact information is in the link tree as well, my email as well as our website. Again, if you're coming up at any point, please let me know. I love to see folks. I also encourage y'all to send your kids to Paige. It's always great for them to get to be part of this. Couple of things, crossover day, which means any bill that hasn't crossed from one chamber to the other is not viable, is next Thursday. And then the last day of session is April 4th. The last thing I wanted to share with the NAPS folks is our student civic action cohort. This is a relatively new program that we started last year, kind of informally, when I ran into a group of high school students who just happened to be there for College Board AP Day. It has turned into a program that we are really proud of and are really, really enjoying. What happens is we meet with a group of students. Typically, we focused on high school at this point, but I'm working to do this for middle school. We meet with them every other week during the off season, so pretty much from August through December. And we teach them about the different levels of policy. We teach them where policy gets made, what it looks like. And then we teach them how to read bills and how to advocate. And all of this culminates into a day where they come to the Capitol with us and spend the whole day doing the work of an education advocate with us. So since then, so this year we've had about, I think 15 kids come with us. So far this session, they have done things like give committee hearing comment. They have given, they've advocated directly to legislators. They've talked in press conferences. They have spoken to media reporters, all in an effort just to be more engaged in the process. I know NAPS maybe doesn't have that structure, but I think that we probably have some really engaged social studies teachers or someone at the high school level that might be interested in facilitating a space like that. I also have some money for schools to be able to offer this. So we provide the food and we provide some stipends to the teachers who are sponsoring. And so, yeah, I'm highlighting that as well. It's just like we're trying to build some interest for this next cycle that'll start in August of 25. If your kids are interested in that. And also, I know some of you have kids that are already pretty tuned in, and we have some openings in March for folks to come with us. If that's something you're interested in, please let me know.
Thank you, Michaela. We'll put all this information up on the NAPS Facebook page. Give us a day, and we'll make it shareable and downloadable and all that fun stuff. And thank you all for joining us. And we will definitely do this again, and we'll narrow the focus of the next one.
Okay.
All right. Thanks everybody. Bye-bye.